me ask you this question. Is it still possible for you to be amazed at Christmas? I'm not talking about your ability to enjoy it. Of course you can enjoy it. We all enjoy it. There's nothing about our age, there's nothing about our experience, there's nothing about us unable to be surprised because we understand how everything works that will tarnish our ability to enjoy something. What I'm talking about is something different. Amazement is altogether different. Are you able to still be amazed? Now, we see it in children, don't we? I mean, you hold out a gift box for a child and they light up with curiosity and wonder. It is as though their imaginations are ignited with excitement as they imagine what it would be like to open that. What will they discover for themselves inside of the box? It's easy, it's natural for kids to feel amazement. It can be harder for us adults, can't it? Why is that? Why does it come so easily to them and it's harder for us? Well, probably, not understanding how things work, that probably helps. That will help feed wonder and amazement. Not having to be entangled with, not having to be bothered with, not understanding at all how it is that festivities are scheduled or decorations managed or gifts budgeted for and purchased and wrapped and delivered. Just not understanding all of that, not having to think about all of that, that feeds wonder and amazement. I remember when I was a kid, maybe you could think back to what it was like for you, but when I was a kid, it just felt like the wonder of Christmas just happened. And I had no clue how hard my parents and other people worked to give me my cherished Christmas memories. But you know how things work, don't you? I know how things work. Is it true that there just comes a point where Christmas loses the luster of you and me being able to be amazed ever again? How many Christmas sermons have you heard in your life? How many Christmas movies have you watched? My kids are 14 and 17. They're going to make me watch Polar Express again tonight. That might be a record. How many lines have you stood in? Over the course of your life, how many square feet of wrapping paper do you think you have cut and taped and applied and gotten mad at, even late, to the late hours of the night? I'm curious, who in here, you have an unfinished Christmas to-do list when you get home? It is hard to feel amazed when you are up past midnight finishing that up. I'm not talking about enjoying it. Yes, of course, we love it. We enjoy it. But is it possible for you to be amazed? And that video that we watched before I took the stage, where the narrators read through Luke's account of that first Christmas night when Jesus was born, it ended with this line, and all who heard were amazed. I want to ask you for something. And before I make my request, let me set the terms. This is for everyone. This is for every one of you. If you are devout and religious, this is for you. If you would consider yourself more curious and skeptical, this is for you too. And I want to be clear, what I'm about to ask for is not for me. It really is for you. And so here it is. Would you give yourself permission to be amazed? Now, don't put any pressure on yourself, but just would you give yourself permission to be amazed? You can't force yourself to be amazed. That's not possible. And I'm not going to promise you that I'm going to amaze you tonight. Chances are that's not going to happen. But what if? What if you don't have to pretend? And what if I don't have to perform? If amazement truly were a possibility, would you give yourself permission right now in this moment to entertain that possibility? As you're thinking about that, I want to ask you to do something. Would you think of this box? Look at this box with me and just think of it. Imagine that this represents the entire universe and all that is contained inside the universe. Now, you don't have to yet necessarily believe in the biblical perspective of origins. You don't have to necessarily believe in the biblical account of how the universe came to be, but it's important that you know it, for you to be able to understand why the shepherds and all who heard them that night were amazed. And if you're saying, well, Rick, it's obvious why they were amazed. They saw an angel, or they think that they saw an angel, and as spectacular as that is, you might want to reconsider that assumption. Because it was only the shepherds who saw the angel that night, and as spectacular and grand as it is to be able to see that, the essence of their wonder really is far deeper and much more profound than that. Whenever and however God designed the universe, when he did it, it's somewhat like this box. Just like I'm outside the box, God exists outside the boundaries of his universe. God exists outside of the boundaries of space and matter and time. And just like we like to put valuable things inside of a gift box, the most valuable act of creation is contained inside of this box that God created. And it is you. It is all of humanity. And from the very beginning, it was his intention to be known by and engaged with all people. And so, like this box, he made it with the ability for the lid to be open. You and I were designed to live inside of a universe with an open lid. Even though we live inside of this box, we were hardwired to find our purpose and our value and our security in the one who is on the outside. We were designed to be connected to the one who's on the outside, who loves us, who designed us to reflect what he is like. But tragically, the lid was closed. The connection was lost. The connection was severed by the reality and the impact of our sin. And if you were to say to me, if you had a chance just to be really honest with me, and you might say, hey, Rick, listen, I'm not necessarily a Bible person. I don't really get on board with the concept or the word sin. And really, I'm here because I want to keep Mama happy, and I love Mom, and she likes to come here, so I'm here tonight. Isn't it true? Isn't it true that whatever you call it, whatever label you would put on it, when we look around, we all see the impact of flawed, morally broken human choices? It's all around us. It's even in us, isn't it? The box is closed. Every chapter in the story of humanity is full of people who somehow think they can find God in a distant corner of the box. And ironically and simultaneously, every chapter of the human story is full of people who love to proclaim there is no God because you cannot find him anywhere inside this box. When the Soviet Union put the very first human being in space, Nikita Khrushchev said, we sent up our astronaut and he looked and God was not there. There have been comedians, there have been philosophers who have laughed off the idea of God as some sort of invisible man in the sky or some other silly thing floating around in space. And yet, the biblical account and the biblical perspective has always been that God exists outside of the box, that he can't be found in it. And if we were to know him, if we were to discover him, it would be because he opened the lid of the box and made himself known and came to us. I'm curious if any of you recognize the name Peter Wimsey. Peter Wimsey is not a real person, he is a fictional character. He's a fictional character in a series of short stories and mystery novels that were written by Dorothy Sayers. And Peter Wimsey, he was a detective. He had all kinds of admirable qualities. And for all of his admirable qualities, something was missing. Peter Wimsey was alone. And he lacked true companionship. And so the author, Dorothy Sayers, who created Peter Wimsey, she decided to solve the problem, to solve this dilemma, by writing herself into the stories. And she did so as the character Harriet Vane. And over the course of several books, the complicated dance of their romance played out, and eventually Peter Wimsey and Harriet Vane were married. Other authors and experts tell us that they believe that Dorothy Sayers not only wrote herself into the story, but that she actually fell in love with Peter Wimsey, the character who she created. And so she wrote herself into the story because she loved him and because she wanted to rescue him from his loneliness. The message of Christmas is that God has opened up the lid, and that he has placed himself inside, and that he has written himself into the story, that he has written himself into the story in the person of Jesus Christ because he loves the people who he created. Jesus is called Emmanuel because it means God is with us. And that night when the shepherds shared all that they had to share, people were amazed, and it was not merely because some of them got to see an angel. Everyone who heard the reports, none of them saw angels. And yet they were awestruck. And the reason they were awestruck is because they understood the magnitude of the message that the box does not have to remain closed. The lid has been ripped off, and God has placed himself inside. He has written himself into our story. And allowing yourself to be hit by the full weight of that, that is what makes amazement possible for all of us. For those of us who would say we're devoted, and for those of us who would say that we are doubters. Amazement is possible because this is true. Or amazement is possible because this is offered to you right now with unflinching seriousness. Either way, would you give yourself permission to be amazed? Can you remember the last time, or simply a time, that you heard something or you experienced something that amazed you? And I'm not just talking about an emotional response. I'm talking about something that caused you to forever see the world differently. And I know a lot of us can relate to this one. It's the first time that you hold your own child in your hand, right? That's what we're supposed to say. I'm supposed to say it that way. For me, it was really 3 hours after that, and I changed her diaper for the first time. That's when I knew the world was different. Maybe for you, there's that person who you deeply admire, and you discover that he or she, they respect and admire you in return. Whatever it is for you, we all probably have multiple moments in our life that stop us dead in our tracks and humble us with amazement. And as great as amazement is, it will fade, as all emotional responses do. And whatever that moment is that you're thinking about, if it impacted you and the impact remained, it's likely because you responded with more than mere amazement. Going back to the video we saw a few minutes ago when our narrators read the account from Luke chapter 2, that first Christmas night, they stopped just short of a sentence that I think that you need to hear. In the account that they were reading, it was written by Luke, one of the men who wrote a biography of Jesus' life. Luke was an academic. He's a guy who's incredibly easy to respect because of his success across multiple disciplines. He was a physician. His writings continue to be admired by modern historians because he is a gold standard in the ancient world for historical accuracy and detail. And he is a guy who would have known and interacted with Mary personally. And based on those interviews with her, he used that to help write his biography of Jesus' life. And based on his interactions with her, he wrote this very next line that I want you to hear. He writes, "But Mary treasured up all of these things and pondered them in her heart." And before any of us, just kind of write that off as a quaint statement about a mom, it is to your benefit to understand the hefty implication of that word, ponder. This is originally written in Greek, and the Greek word for ponder is symbolousa. It means to consider and weigh out the facts. It is a serious word. It's a word that's far more like intellectual rigor than anything emotional and syrupy. She pondered. She thought seriously. And for any of us who showed up today, or maybe who is watching online, if you show up with questions and doubts and maybe even some skepticism, you need to hear this. You can relate to Mary maybe more than you possibly thought. Did you know that there's nothing wrong with doubt? Doubt is incredibly healthy, and doubt is an indicator that our minds are turned on, that we are intellectually engaged. Doubt shows up when we don't know how to bring together two things that claim to be true. And though she was a key player in the story, though she was a big part of the historical events that took place that night, Mary engaged in the healthy reality of doubt as she pondered. And everyone around her was filled with amazement, and Mary felt it too. But it was more than her heart that was ignited. Her mind was on fire as she asked serious questions. Questions like, what does this really mean? What are the implications of this? What am I going to do with this? And I want to encourage you, this is my challenge or my invitation to you, is to don't let the routines of Christmas lull you into intellectual passivity. And so I want to ask us, can we, for the next couple of minutes, can we ponder together? Several minutes ago, I said that you were hardwired. We were designed to find our purpose and our value and our security in the one who is outside of the box. And that's the kind of thing you expect a pastor to say, look to God for all that you need. But what does that mean? Let me ask a couple of things. How has this year messed with you? I think my favorite meme of 2020 is it looks like a Google review. It just says 2020 and it has 1 star and says would not recommend. So let me ask, what anxiety, what fear, what disappointment has popped up for you? In what ways? In what ways have you realized that you've taken some things for granted and things that you always thought that you could count on? You realize you can't count on those things anymore. Let's push past 2020. I mean, that's everybody's favorite piñata. Let's look past that. Let's turn the spotlight on ourselves. In what ways have you experienced unmet expectation only to discover you were powerless to make it right? I'm a pastor. My job is to be a leader. My job is to help teams get things right, to help us create great experiences. Could we be honest? Does this feel weird? Doesn't it feel like there's an invisible barrier between us and what we desperately want to experience and how we want to express ourselves? And we can't make it right. The world should be better than this. Let me ask you this question. How have you relied on yourself only to discover that all your best efforts, all your accomplishments, all your capabilities, all of your intellect fall short of fully satisfying your need for purpose and value and security? How have you experienced the consequences of your own moral choices? How have you had to endure the consequences of other people's moral choices? And what we're asking you to do, what it means to ponder, is to take all of that and combine it with this stunning realization that the lid is open, that God has stepped inside, that he has written himself into the story because his heart beats for you, because he wants to rescue you from all that is broken. Well, what does this mean? Well, it means many things, but one of the things that it means is though we are far more morally broken and sinful and inadequate on our own than we could ever dare admit to ourselves, much less to anybody else, that simultaneously we are far more loved and accepted and forgiven in Christ and wanted by him than we could ever dare hope. And that means that fear and shame lose all their power in our life. What are the implications of this? Well, there are many, but here's one. That need that we have for purpose and value and security, it does not depend on your moral performance, and it doesn't depend on your religious performance. It is a gift from the one who opened the lid and wrote himself into our story. What will we do with this? The answer to that really is up to you. Luke tells us that Mary did more than ponder. She did more than think through all the radical implications of this. He said that she treasured these things in her heart. Pastor Tim Keller writes this: Mary doesn't just try to understand the Word of God cognitively. She takes it all the way inside, as it were, to relish and experience it. The treasure is not so much a technique as an attitude. Is it too bold of me to ask you, what is your attitude towards Jesus? And what we're asking you tonight is to accept this invitation, to not let the familiarity of Christmas lull you into shallow emotionalism, but to bend our hearts and our minds to ponder and to treasure all that is hidden for us in the message of Christmas. I want to share with you something that the Apostle Paul wrote. In Colossians 2, he says, "My goal is that you may be encouraged in heart and united in love, so that you may have the full riches of complete understanding, in order that you may know the mystery of God, namely Christ, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge." It is nothing short of amazing that the lid is open and that he has placed himself inside, written himself into our story. And we can know all of this by choosing to know him. Would you ponder that? And would you treasure him?